project manager here at COSIN, and I will be moderating today's webinar, On Guard, Protecting Your Network from Cybersecurity Threats. COSIN is the Consortium for School Networking. We are the premier professional association for district technology leaders, and we provide leaders with the management, community building, and advocacy tools they need to succeed. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us several experts who are technology leaders. Myself, Marie Biarda, will be moderating. We also have presenting Keith Bockwald, who is the Director of Technology Services at Township High School. Hello, Keith. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Diane Dorsch, Chief Technology and Information Officer of the Green Bay Area Public School District in Wisconsin. Hello, Diane.
Hi there. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And Nathan Milkey, Director of Technology Services, Hartford Junior High School District. Hi, Nathan.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So what I'd like to do is to give each of you just a moment to share a little bit about yourself and your districts. Nathan, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself and your district a little bit?
Sure. My name's Nathan Milkey. This is my fourth year in Hartford leading IT services. Before that, I was library media specialist and data coordinator in other districts around the state. We are unique to Wisconsin district because we are a high school only district. There's only a few handfuls of those in Wisconsin. We're lucky enough to be able to have all our resources all under one building. We're one building, one district. We serve about 1,400 kids in what I call an exurb of Milwaukee. We're about 45, 50 minutes from downtown, directly northwest in Washington County. So that's a little bit about me and where I work.
Diane? Diane, can you hear us?
I'll jump in now for Marie. This is Keith Bockwald. I'm the Director of Technology and Township High School District 214, Arlington Heights, Illinois. We are just northwest of O'Hare Airport, about 20 minutes. We serve about 12,100 students. We're a full one-to-one district, high-achieving district, also all high schools, 6 comprehensive high schools, and 3 special program schools.
Thanks, Keith. Diane, do you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. I'm Diane Dersch, Chief Technology and Information Officer for Green Bay Area Public Schools. I've been a classroom teacher for 21 years, and I'm going on my 8th year of first Director of Technology and now CTIO. Here in Green Bay, we've got 40 schools, and we've got about 21,150 students. I lead a department of 43.
Great, thank you so much. So let's jump right in. I've got some questions for all of you. The first one is something that's happening currently in the news. We heard recently from the IRS that there's a phishing scam out there that is targeting W-2s, and apparently somebody will contact the head of HR or a head of finance and say, this is the superintendent, I need everybody's W-2s right away, send them to me, and apparently a lot of folks have actually done that. How do you protect against something like that? Diane, would you like to start?
Certainly. First of all, we need to be informed. Something that I did in preparation for this whole presentation was call together my network team, and we talked about questions, and we all got on the same page. I suggest all leaders do that, have a common discussion with all the team who's involved in this. And something I asked the team is, where do you go to find the most current news about things? Because this IRS scam was actually posted, that it was a scam on the IRS page. I had learned from this from COSIN. I do believe we actually got a notification about this scam. You see it on the news. So I asked my network team, well, where do you go for news? And they gave me places, that they go to. We've got some local and regional tech groups But then I said, do me a favor and go out and find one more site that you're going to check often so that you can learn about these things ahead of time before they take place. So being informed is one of them. And then once you find that information, you need to share it with those key stakeholders because, you know, clearly this could be anyone who has a W-2. You want to let your staff know that this is an issue. I don't want to go through all the answers because I want to leave, you know, the guys some things to answer as well. But, you know, being informed and also once you get that information, informing the people who need to know is important.
Nathan, Keith, do you have something to add?
I mean, I would say, you know, to piggyback on what Diane mentioned, educating your staff. I try to get out in front and talk about recent events in cybersecurity and in other IT related areas to talk about them, so folks are aware of them. One of the things that we've done recently, we do our own internal phishing audits. I talked to someone who's a trusted, known person in the district. Get their okay to use them as a phony email address and see how many clicks I get. I mean, unfortunately, we're at about 50% even after doing some education on this. So I know there's more work to do, but educating and testing things out, I think is my #1 way of trying to deal with this in my district.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I don't know if this happened in their districts, but it certainly happened in mine 2 years ago. The request came in, looked like it came from the superintendent, obviously was a spoofed address. The people that got it actually went and asked the superintendent's admin assistant if they really needed these W-2s. So they had the foresight, #1, to realize that he wouldn't be asking for this, so that was good. But that led me down a path of, you know, how do we prevent this in the future? So #1, both my colleagues brought up the awareness and being informed. One of the things that we do is consistently send out messages to our staff to let them know of different things going on with these different scams. This one is really hitting hard now because of the season, the tax season. The reason they want those W-2s is to file these false returns. So what we've done is we put some DNS records in place. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but there's 3 specific records that can prevent the spoofed messages. Not only that, is when a email comes in and somebody thinks that it's not legitimate, doesn't look right, we have a mechanism in place where staff will either send it to me or we actually ask them to send it to the help desk. We take a look at it then to confirm that it is a scam, and then we'll send out a message to all staff saying, hey, this is a scam. We also have them look at the underlying URL. We let them know to hover over the URL, see if it's a real link or not. And that has been, it's went over well in the district. It's kind of interesting because, you know, I'll be out at night and I'll be at the gym working out and I'll be on the elliptical doing my thing and I'll be checking my email and here's an email from one of the staff saying, hey, this doesn't look legit. So, you know, it's caught on in the district. So one of the biggest pieces is making sure that your staff is informed and knowing what to look for in those emails.
Another thing that we've done is we've even created a logo that we put by all the emails that we send out that are security related, so that people know when you see the yellow dot, that tells you it's security related, you should pay attention.
Fantastic. So another current issue, there's been a huge rise in ransomware attacks. How does the district prepare for those?
Well, according to COSIN, you know, they put out a paper on this a while back. One of the first things that you should have in place is a solid working backup plan where you can roll back to. You know, they typically don't advise to pay, but it happens every week. You see these articles out there where there's been these ransomware attacks going on, and then people are paying thousands of dollars to get their data back or to unlock their data. I think, you know, when it comes to this, having the backup plan in place and then also, you know, having that awareness out there to your staff, knowing what to look for. We're primarily Mac district, but we do have a lot of PCs in CAD lab areas. it is starting to become prevalent on the Mac side as well. So just having those mechanisms in place for the awareness, having your antivirus, having your malware protection in place to identify what's going on. We also have our firewall send us notifications if there's something that doesn't look right when it's being filtered through the firewall. It sends us notifications. If we have a computer that's infected for some reason, it's sending out these, I call them "come get me" responses, or saying "come get me" to the district. We basically send a note to our supervisors to have them shut down those computers. This is identified through email through our firewall, and it actually reports back to us the IP address, the name of the computer. We go have it shut down until that computer is cleaned off. We have that, believe it or not, in our security vestibules, where those staff are doing their job, but then they're doing some surfing, in between doing security checks. So those computers get more infected than others. So we're constantly monitoring our systems to make sure that ransomware, we don't become a recipient of an attack with ransomware.
Having another piece in terms of managing IT is that you have proper rights in your file structure. Our neighbor came over the other day. She works in an engineering firm. They rely a lot on shared files, or shared folders, excuse me. And they were just wide open. And one person got hit, and all their shared folders got hit. They were down for 2 days. And this is, an engineering firm that, has a bottom line, and they were sending people home because there was nothing, their shop, there was nothing for them to do because they were backpedaling and trying to get things back in place. So back to what Keith said, they probably didn't have good backups, and they just kind of had this folder structure that was wide open, that when one person got hit, a lot of critical information got hit at the same time.
You have anything to add, Diane? So next we'll get to kind of the big topic here. What are the other top threats to districts, and what are some of the ways to address them?
I think we've hit on two already. Ransomware, phishing, obviously distributed denial of service attacks are pretty big. This is one thing as school districts are going to one-on-one or being more dependent on internet-related resources that can really impact instruction. And, if I remember a few years ago, I think it was 3+ years ago, right around our Thanksgiving break it was actually Good Friday, we started getting warnings from our network monitoring system. Our district was being attacked, and, we started working on it right away. We didn't have a lot going on in the district, which was good, so it was a good time for an attack. I don't think any time is really a good time, but this was a better time for one, since there was nobody in session. But we started looking at it, and we drilled down into the firewall. We saw where the attacks were coming from. We started blocking those IP addresses. They were coming from Asia Pacific networks. And then our internet service provider called us and said, hey, this was late in the afternoon. They said, hey, you guys are getting some big attacks. You know that? Yeah, we know. We're working on it. So they helped us out. What they did is they black holed up on their end, so on the backbone of their network, it was blocked, so it didn't come down our internet connection to us. But that led me to a realization of how do we take care of this? So I started looking at threat mitigation services and looking at our ISPs, because we want something that's more proactive than reactive. What happened to us on that Black Friday in November was more reactive than anything. And we can't afford to be reactive anymore. So what we do is we purchase a threat mitigation service through our ISP that blocks all the traffic up on their end. It notifies us via email if there's an attack happening, how big the attack is. But I also have to say, part of this was our fault as well. We had these PC computers, and I mentioned earlier about the malware and some of these requests going out saying, come get me. That is the worst thing that you can have happening. If you're protecting your computers in your environment, you shouldn't have a whole lot of these denial of service attacks. I'm not saying it won't happen. It will happen. They'll try to attack websites and such, but if you have these internal issues sending out these requests, it's creating these bot networks, infecting these other computers, and then you got all these other hosts that are trying to attack you. So if you're keeping your house clean, number one, your risks are going to be a little bit less, but still you need to protect your network. What we've been trying to do at a bigger level is try to work with these internet service providers to get a good price, because what's happening now with security, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. When it comes to ransomware, there's appliances out there. When it comes to phishing, there's appliances out there. Everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie. No different with denial of service attacks. So what we're doing, also companies don't understand education, that we don't have a lot of money to work with either, right? So what we're trying to do is work with vice presidents and presidents of companies to say, hey, we're education. We provide a very different service than companies do. We're not selling a product. We're not an online store losing millions of dollars a minute, but we also have a lot of instruction going on. Our teachers and students depend on this. If you think about it, in our districts that are one-to-one, you know, we have probably bigger enterprise networks than some companies do because of all the bandwidth that's needed. So, you know, our goal moving forward, and encourage everybody to continue to work with your internet service providers to find out what threat mitigation services they have and how they can also help you reduce that cost, because one of the companies that I worked with just recently last year, they wanted to charge us $23,000 a month. That's a month. And then another company wanted to charge us $30,000 a month. And the company that was $30,000 a month, that was for 2 gig of clean traffic, only 2 gig of clean traffic. School districts just can't afford that. So we need to continue to educate these companies, the internet service providers. We also have to continue to protect ourselves.
I'm going to jump in here, and if I jump out or just give you a blank look like this, it's because for some reason the sound cuts in, out, so you can tell by my expression if I don't have anything. I want to go back to the previous question as well and wrap this in, because as you talk about the top threats to our district, our people, they're not threats, but our people need to be very well educated so that they can recognize early on when things happen. For instance, you know, if their computer's starting to run slow, if there are ads or pop-ups appearing on their screen, those are some signs that something funky may be happening on your network. And so, you know, having that early warning from your people, that and your system should pick it up as well, having a really good firewall who can that can be proactive and warn you is also really important too. But then, you know, do they know words like Bitcoin or torrent or some of these things that some of the pop-up screens may provide, because that's telling you, yeah, you're being compromised somehow. So being able, when these threats are here, being able to have people recognize the threats, because they come in so many different ways that, you know, it's almost inevitable that something's going to happen. Having a plan in place when it does happen. I really like Keith's idea about the mitigation, and believe me, we are all doing what we feel we can do and are able to do with the resources we have. But you know, you need to have a tight plan. You know, are you going to isolate that machine? Are you going to make sure that you're cutting off the traffic? Are you going to restore? How quick is that going to be? Where are you going to restore? Those types of things, so that when it happens, you've practiced it, you know what to do when that happens.
This past fall, in my district, we became very tight with our ISP WISPnet because we were getting hit up so often with DDoS attacks. We were, you know, out of all the schools and businesses they support in the month of October, we were #1 on their list. So again, going back to what Keith talked about, working with your ISP, they were able to do some things on their back end where if traffic was going to such port where it seemed to be coming from for this attack, it was just getting dropped off before it even came down to our circuit. So it wasn't plugging us up. But the one thing that's been most successful, and it's been successful in another district, another small district in Wisconsin, a place called Westfield, was getting hit up pretty regularly for about a month, and it is boots on the ground and getting in touch with law enforcement and being clear that you're in touch with law enforcement. In the case in Westfield, once that went out, once that went out over the PA systems in all their schools 5 days in a row that the police were involved, then it stopped. You know, I'm in one building. I'm kind of like the assistant principal of technology here. So once the kids started getting called down, and the dean of students and I were talking to them about this, you know, word gets out. Kids don't do things, you know, you know, use their credit card or their parents' credit card to pay for a DDoS attack. Things like that don't happen if kids are going to talk about it. So, you know, letting people know that you're serious about this. This is a big deal. You're taking down a business's ability to operate for an extended amount of time. Then those things tail off, and that was my experience. That was Westfield's experience. When we tried to put things in place, one vendor was very good about giving us a tool to try out that would go on between our ISP and our firewall. We had limited success with that. I think the point where that stuff gets cleaned out needs to be upstream. It shouldn't be that close to your network. But boots on the ground, talking to kids, letting them know you're serious. I think that's what's worked for me.
Nathan, you brought up a good point, because you know, these kids nowadays have access to all these tools that are available on the internet now, and DDoS for hire, right? It's, you have $20 and DDoS your district. So, you know, we have to be aware of that. I know that there are local school districts here that they went for months trying to catch the kids that were starting this internally and attacking their districts internally. So I like your point of, you know, having those communications with the kids and getting the word out, because they'll be a little more reluctant to try to do something once they know they're being watched.
One last thing I want to bring up before my sound goes out: the Internet of Things. You know, security cameras, other things that have hardwired code in them have been known now to be taken over and be part of launching DDoS attacks. The one that happened this fall with the attacks on major DNS servers was an example of that. So, you know, a lot of times it's your facilities people or non-technical people who are installing security cameras and things. You need to make sure that if there is a default password to change, that they change that default password, because everything comes, remember, with a default password, and when people don't change it, even your home router, you're opening yourself up for vulnerability.
Thank you. That was great. So my next question has some parts to it. What I want to know is, what are the steps that you take to ensure network security? And I'm trying to find out, what does that mean, you know, at the very basic levels, that everybody, this hygiene that everybody needs to do? What do you consider standard? You know, this is what really you should be seeing in a district. And then are there even beyond that advanced levels that some districts are starting to look to as well? So, three-part question. Let's start by talking about the basic level. What do you guys see as a basic level of security?
You have to have a strong firewall. That's all that's to it. They cost a lot of money, but you cannot scrimp on that, because remember, that's what controls what comes into your district. We rely a lot on the notifications that come from that, and also the reports. We take baseline reports, we compare those reports often to see, you know, what kind of activity is taking place. When anomalies are pointed out, we check into those right away. And that all happens at that firewall level. So in my opinion, that's your first place to start.
I agree with my colleague. I would say the same thing. It's, you know, having a solid firewall in place is the basic. also having your antivirus and your malware protection on the endpoints.
Moving internally, just following, general best practices in setting up your network. We just put in a new IP camera system for security. And one of the stories that the technicians told was how they installed it in the district. They said, well, let's set up a VLAN for that. That just makes sense. Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Well, so the VLAN, so the cameras were sitting right where everything else was. Kid hacked into the cameras, hacked into everything else, and it was easy pickings. So I mean, there are plenty of schools in this country that have been, networks probably have been put together and kept together with bubblegum and chicken wire. So getting someone in there and investing in someone that's going to understand best practices, get those in place, and have the money behind those things to get the right things in place, I think is very important. And even going back to my my neighbor's issue with the folder rights and getting knocked out by ransomware. I mean, that's just basic stuff.
Okay, so once you go beyond the basic level, is there some other things that you would recommend? Just like you really should be doing this, just beyond even the basic.
I'd love to be able to do what he's doing, where you're getting clean traffic in. That's not a question we've, when we talked to our ISP when we were having issues, they talked about how they couldn't afford it at that point in time. I mean, I think that would be spectacular if that could be just commonplace. And I think as time moves on, hopefully we'll be able to work with our ISPs or find an ISP that's going to be able to help provide that for a reasonable cost, and educating everybody in your district as well as you can, because they're sometimes the first and only firewall out there to stop the bad guys from getting in.
I would call this basic and standard. Basic networking practices. When you rebuild servers, rebuild them from scratch. Never download onto, patches or things directly from the internet onto your server. You want to do that from a different account, not an admin account, and you want to run it through an antivirus before it even touches your network. You don't want to have vendors out there that you've used maybe 2 or 3 years ago and still have VPN access, virtual private network access into the system. Again, this is something that has been talked about a lot with third-party vendors, refrigeration or air conditioning, HVAC people having access to your network, and then the compromise coming in through there. So that's another thing. You're really going to want to limit your remote access, desktop access, to make sure that you know who's coming in. You can't be random with that. You have to have some expectations with that. And learning from your resources, I mean, the people who work in security daily with the hardware that you may purchase are going to be great experts on this. Take advantage of that time that you work with them. You're paying them anyway. So learn from them. And then lastly, and this should be basic, standard, and even advanced, don't share accounts. Make sure that your technical team is keeping accounts where they need to be. Make sure that your basic user groups each has a way to authenticate in. Don't let them share accounts, because again, accountability goes away when there are shared accounts, and it becomes a lot more difficult to track.
I agree. The awareness, the VPN account access, permission levels, but for me, that standard now today would be all wrapped in an information security policy. All those components would be included in that information security policy, and you would have your requirements for passwords, password length, password complexity, password changes, access controls, incident response plans. To me, that's just the standard nowadays of what we should have in school districts as a minimum to guide us. What we've done here, we've taken it a step further. So we've created a module within Global Compliance Network. We have to go through these modules every year for compliance. And I get together with Human Resources, and we developed a module which walks folks through all the pieces of, what does a phishing email look like? What do the URLs look like? What's a complex password? Why would you want to put a PIN on your phone? We don't want to add more to staff. However, with digital, everything going digital and all the information that's out there and all the information that's held on our phones nowadays, we have to make sure those are secure. So again, that awareness piece and having that in policy for us to review every year. We review that information security policy every year, and we go through that. We have our staff go through the Global Compliance Network each year, sign off on it. It's just that review and awareness to make sure that people understand that this is important. And I have to say, people are becoming much more aware of this because they see it day in and day out in the media, right? So people are very cautious about information flying around, and us being stewards of that information. I think having a good information security policy, guidelines, and practice in place is going to help us continue to secure our networks. I always tell our administration, I can never guarantee everything's going to be 100% secure. I can never guarantee that because we're humans. I can't control, and nobody can control what everybody else is doing in the district. There could be a piece of paper floating around that I'm not aware of that has personal information on it. So I can't guarantee that. All we can do is put best practices in place and guidelines and follow those procedures the best we can to protect our districts.
Thank you. And then the question is, are there practices that you would consider to be advanced and yet are affordable or within reach of at least some districts?
I'm going to go on and again, because I would say a cybersecurity team in your district that's a cross-functional team that can talk each month, discuss cybersecurity about, hey, what's going on out there in the world, what's happening in our district, what are things that we can do to inform staff or things that we need to protect on our network. I remember last year we had a new LMS come on board, and our students, we didn't have a secure certificate attached to it. And the company didn't know how to apply our certificate to the cloud solution they were using. So our security class, the kids came to me and they were sniffing traffic, and they said, oh, by the way, Mr. Bachwell, we can read clear text passwords. So we knew what was going on, but we had to get with the company and say, hey, we need to fix this quickly. We need to get this certificate applied because we have secure certificates applied to all of our other sites, but we had no control of them applying it. They got on it right away. We had it fixed, and then I actually met with the students, and we talked about cybersecurity. So we're bringing this down now to not only a security team within our department, a cross-functional team across the district, but we're trying to get more kids involved. And what we're going to be doing in the next month or so is doing a Twitter chat with students on cybersecurity to increase their awareness of what it means to be secure and how they can protect their information.
I think if you could fix into the budget, every year or every other year to do pen testing, to do a security audit. I mean, we pay because we have to have our books audited every year for finances. Why should, just because it's not required by law, why shouldn't that be a priority for school districts? I know it's not cheap, but I think it's something well worth the money that would be invested by the district.
Okay,
fantastic. Are you talking about advanced again?
Yes, we are.
Okay, one last thing that I want to say is what we're working on now is language. When you are finding some of these incidents happening, what does your degree of language look like? Can we pre-write some language so when this happens, we can just, what can I say, update it without having alarming language, having it very calm, because anytime you would say something like breach or there's been an incident, that gets people worried. And so you want to have levels of degree. You know, when is this an anomaly we need to check out, or when do we really need to let the superintendent know? And so being able to define those instances ahead of time instead of when you're in it and it's really happening is a good way to go.
Excellent. Excellent suggestions, everyone. So my next question is about incidents. How do you monitor for incidents, and what kind do you monitor for?
Well, I'll jump in here. You know, we're constantly looking at the firewall logs, intrusion prevention, to see exactly what kind of attacks are happening. It's kind of interesting because as we look at our data, we've had an exponential growth from 2014 to 2017 in the amount of attacks that happen at any given time against the district. It's becoming more and more of a concern. So one of the things that we find out is, after looking at the logs, you know, where are these attacks coming from? SIN attacks, botnet attacks. Just recently, we had some attacks hitting our web servers. My webmaster had identified that we had some Russian networks that were trying to attack our web servers. They were just doing constant scans.
Right. So,
you know, we basically went into our firewall. We blocked those networks from coming in. So it's just a matter, in my eyes, of, you know, looking at monitoring on a regular basis. Now, I don't know how many districts have a security person. We don't have the luxury of having a security person. So what we have to do is bond together as a team and kind of segment our duties out and make sure that we're looking at these things on a daily basis. I have a very good team that's very in tune. It's almost like a challenge for them. You know, what's going on? Here's the next thing, and here's how we need to protect it, Keith. And, you know, so having the guys engaged with it, I think, is really important. And when it becomes a challenge, it kind of becomes a cat and mouse game, right? The guys are really standing up to the challenge and say, hey, we're not going to let them in. We're going to protect our district. So, and they're always looking at different tools and different solutions. So for us, it's a daily thing, looking at the logs, dissecting, and, you know, we get the reports from the firewall as well, and kind of looking at what do we need to shore up to make sure that we're secured.
Well, and our guys and women take a look at anomalies on the network. For instance, if you have spikes in internet traffic in the middle of the night, that might cause you to, you know, investigate a little more. Is there an update going on, or is there something else going on? We also take a look at our life cycle review, like I've talked about. So, what are the apps in use? You know, and are these typical apps that we would expect to be in use? Are more people using Dropbox? That's what one of our network engineers talked about, saying, you know, if there's an uptick on people using Dropbox, did they accidentally download something and think they were really sending it to Google Drive or something else and Dropbox is being used? So we keep an eye on that, as well as, you know, the known malware coming through, our vulnerability exploits. These are all in reports that we can check out, and we do monitor those often.
And we'll keep an eye on what sort of traffic WISCnet, our ISP, sees coming into our district. We rely a lot on our internal monitoring. I mean, everybody looks at their firewall stats, but I would say our internal monitoring helps us out a lot with our daily issues, trying to isolate where incidents are, and that can be, you know, that's used for cybersecurity threats, or, you know, just something being down, and having a good monitoring system in place. You know, there's your basic and standard for how you monitor for incidents. You have to have that in place. You know, up until about
I would also suggest,
have that in place.
I would also suggest, too, that we use our students towards our advantage. We have our cybersecurity class, or security class, and I mentioned to one of the instructors that we really should have a challenge for them to pen test our systems. I would want to know the day that they're doing it, just so I know what's going on, but he's he's willing to do it with the kids, and I think it would be a great challenge for them because they're your best resources. You know, they're looking for ways to get into your network and do different things, and if they're going to find a hole, they're the ones who are going to do it. So I think, you know, I'm looking toward this upcoming year and actually these next few months to work with this teacher to kind of have a challenge, and the challenge may be rewarded in a way where they get a grade for it, and that'll help me identify where I might have some weak spots in the network.
And I would say those type of kids don't care about a grade. The kids that I've worked with, either helping out in the IT department or giving me a heads up on things that are, you know, who might have been doing the DDoS or whatever, they're looking for a place to fit in, and IT is a place where they can feel, feel like their time's being well spent. I mean, a lot of these kids that are trying to find a way to hack in, they're in class and they're bored. So I mean, any way you can get those kids and then help them understand maybe if they did something, you know, that wasn't kosher, that, you know, that isn't kosher and this is why not, and try to get them on your side to help out. I can't think of a time where we've had a kid where we tried to, you know, get off of the dark side that we weren't able to switch over and get them on, you know, helping out with stuff. They're looking for something to do. They're looking for a place where they feel like they belong. And if it's the help desk, if it's, you know, sitting with your network folks when they don't have class or something, you know, we're all educators, whether we have an IT background or not. And that's what our organizations are all about.
So next question: What do you do if you have an incident? What's your process?
Well, we've had one a few years ago. You know, we have systems that are supposed to be used in the district. It was actually a New Year's Day event. We had a teacher that went into the city after New Year's Eve and went out for breakfast, left a laptop on the back seat of the car, covered with a coat. Well, that's a telltale sign that there's something underneath it. Well, he came out and the laptop was gone, and it had all his 504 student information on it. So we have systems where that's supposed to be held. So what we had to do is we had an incident response plan already drafted in place, which was good. We also have cybersecurity insurance as well. But, you know, we wanted to find out exactly who the kids were affected. So I had him give me his whole caseload of students. I had a letter drafted up, sent it to all the parents, and I thought, oh boy, this is going to become a big deal with the parents. And I had 2 phone calls, which I was pretty happy about. And the parents were more concerned about identity theft than anything. The data that was in the 504 information wasn't Social Security numbers, it wasn't driver license numbers, so there's no way that an identity could have been stolen. So once I explained that to the parents, they were fine with it. So out of something that I thought was going to be a big concern, turned out to be a very minimal concern because we had plans in place. And it's just not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when it's going to happen in your district, because these are so prevalent. We can't control all the data, like I said earlier. All we can do is put policies, guidelines, and practices in place to monitor and help our staff understand how to protect information. So having a solid incident response plan drafted and ready to go, having your superintendent involved with it, having your public relations or community relations department involved with it are key components to make sure that something that could be really bad becomes very minimal once you have it executed.
Talk about execution. Also, having this available and practicing it once in a while is helpful. We were hit with CryptoLocker a while ago. We actually set up an incident command center right here in this office. We cleared out all the people who were not part of the problem solving. There's a lot of, yelling back and forth with information that we needed to take care of. So we kept the backstage and, the rest of the world out until we were sure what was going on. And I would handle it like incident command that FEMA puts out. Follow those types of protocols. You need to explore the facts. You need to figure out what needs to be fixed and when and how. Isolating again the impacted and figuring out how to mitigate any further damage, and also control your messaging. Again, having in a binder or something available so that you can take a message and tweak it a bit so you're not writing under distress. Always having somebody proof and someone from the outside world kind of what can I say, translating so that that any acronyms you may use or emergency or techie language is broken down for people to understand is always good. So these are some of the things that, since we've been through it, you know, we have always debriefed at the end what worked well, what didn't work well, how we can make improvements, what we're going to do better next time, and who do we need to bring into this mix. So that when we practice next time, we get better and better at it without the real drama of it happening.
I think the public, no matter what the situation is, they want transparency from their public entities, and this is no different. That you get out in front of the message, so people know that, you know, what the facts are, and trying to get the facts out there right off the bat from you before anything else might hit the media, or might, you know, I mean, might not hit the media in Hartford, but, you know, when people start talking over their fences about what might have happened, just being really open and honest. You know, back to what Keith had said, you know, that he got 2 phone calls, and it sounded like they were, well, I wasn't in on them, but it sounded like two pretty reasonable phone calls. People understand things happen, and as long as you're open and honest about it, you know, you might get yelled at because something happened, but like, you know, said before, it's not about if, it's about when. And if you're open, it's all good. It's going to be as good as you can make it.
Well, I have just one more question before we get to questions from the audience. I have a few lined up here. My final questions to you is, what is your advice to other districts when it comes to cybersecurity? Diane, would you like to start?
Certainly. Education of your staff is really important. You know, you've heard some ideas here about how to get information to your staff about, you know, is this a compliance thing? Are we just going to require this every year? And, you know, how are we going to keep track of that? How are we going to get our information to people? I'm guilty of producing the famous 12-minute talking head video of Diane talking about student data privacy and security, but it gets out the important pieces that need to be there. Our tech integrators, our administrators like it because everyone hears the same thing then. And so there's nothing left up for interpretation. And then building those expectations throughout the year, holding each other accountable, and also providing a lot of information in between. We have something called the Friday Fast 5. It's got 5 bullet points every week that we send out to our staff, and at least one of them is always security related. That's why it has the yellow circle next to it, so that people know, hey, this is a security thing going on. So getting information to your people, involving them is really, really important. The other thing is empowering your internal staff to have good and honest dialogue, so that they're sharing information, so that they're consistently learning, so that they're supporting each other with the information that they're learning, because we cannot stand to be a siloed department any longer. That means that we need to continue to work with the other departments and make sure that we've got business continuity, make sure that we are attuned to the needs of all the other departments within our school district, business department, teaching and learning department. You know, each one of those has different needs. We need to make sure that we are good service providers, customer service providers to those entities, as well as our students in our community.
And I would suggest that we first and foremost get our administration involved, from our superintendent, cabinet, all the way through, all the way down. If you don't have their involvement, if they don't have an understanding of of what's going on there, then we're not going to have the support that we need to communicate to our staff and have those policies. You know, we talked about information security policies. We talked about incident response plans. All of those things are key. But if we don't have our administration or cabinet involved with this conversation, then it's going to be more difficult for us to move forward and have these communications within our districts. One of the things that I do is I have actually a couple board members that right before board meetings we have some general conversation. The one will ask me, hey, what's going on with security? And I give them an update of what's going on, what are the trends, what are the things we're seeing, and you know, that prompts more questions. So he wants me to come and do a brief to the board, which I think is really cool, because now I have a board member that's interested in the security aspects, because he's seeing all these things as well. He's seeing all the media, he's seeing what's happening. He wants to know what's going on with our district. You know, we have a sizable budget that we have to protect. We have all this information we have to protect. So he wants to know. He said, you know, well, Keith, it'd be good if you come to a meeting and present on what's going on with cybersecurity in the district. So I thought it was a great way for me to come in, let them know what's going on, and then they could ask questions. And actually, it's a community forum too, so we'll have community members there. If they wanted to ask questions, I'd be happy to answer those. But at least it gives a little bit of awareness of some of the things that we are doing, not that we're being blind to any of this.
No, one thing I want to bring home on this, my advice to other districts, is that it's so much, in IT we provide a service, so it's all about relationships, and I believe in this area that's the exact same thing. Take advantage of teachable moments. Something happens in the news, talk to your staff about it, let them know what XYZ news story is about cybersecurity and what happened and how it could impact us. And getting back to the relationships. I mean, my team, people are open enough to come and ask when they see something that's an issue. Like when we were doing our little fake phishing campaign, having people follow up and say, "Hey Nathan, I saw this email that was from Monica, but it said @gmail.com instead of @huhs.org." Gold star, awesome, good job. You did the right thing. You didn't click on it. You deleted it. You didn't do anything with that. And then following up with some information with those folks that the group of 20. I do batches of 20 that we do these campaigns with, and follow up with them just to help inform them, help reinforce, and do it with some humility. I've heard horror stories of people doing this. These sort of internal campaigns, and then they click on the link and it says "gotcha." Oh my gosh, I couldn't think of a worse thing to possibly do to a staff member, or to try to one, build trust, build relationships with your staff, and two, trying to present a teachable moment where they're either going to learn from what you talked about in the past, or they'll learn about the feedback you're going to give them after that campaign's over. So all comes back.
I am smiling at that because you're exactly right. There's solutions out there, KnowBe4, Security IQ, where you can fish your staff. I had brought this up to our planning team to discuss, a way for us to get a little more awareness around this, and there are these tools out there, and they thought the same thing. We all agreed that that would be something that they would not like. I gotcha. You can almost think of it like a competition. So what we said is, it was kind of a nice conversation, because they said, Keith, you guys are doing such a good job with the awareness already. Maybe we just do some more Institute Day sessions where you and your team could come in and talk to the staff about this. And, that was kind of cool to have that conversation, because, it was a realization to me is, yeah, that's right. We don't want to just say we got you. We want to help staff understand. It would have had the adverse effect for us.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, all of you. Let's move on to questions from the audience. There was one here for Keith that said that you'd mentioned certain DNS records that can be added for improved security. What are those?
Yeah, I put those in the chat window so people can have them as well. So one is the SPF record. That's the first one. These have to be set up sequentially. It's the Sender Policy Framework record, which is a standard record that most districts I would expect to have just to validate email. The second one is a DKIM record. It's a domain keys identified mail message, and it's a string of keys that are put together to authenticate the email from other domains. And then you have the DMARC record, which is a domain message authentication and response. So with DMARC, this is the end-all, be-all that'll stop spoof messages. And if it's not set up right, it could stop mail flow into your district. So a little research has to be done, but there's a couple things you can do. And to ramp it up when you set up this DMARC record is you set percentages. So for example, if when I was setting this up a few years ago, I would set it up at a 10% level, and I'd let that run for a few days and see the mail flow. And I would do a quarantine. There's two options. You could do a quarantine or reject. I have it set up as a quarantine right now. So even if there is a spoof message come in, quarantine goes into spam and it gets this nice little alert in there that says this is not a secure message, please delete it. Now I could elect to reject that later on, but what I did through the whole process, I went 10%, 20%, all the way up to 100%. And it's pretty amazing now because, you know, the amount, we don't get spoof messages. When they do come in, they go into quarantine right now. Staff don't even see them because they hardly check the spam anyway, because the spam is, you know, through the rules, it is pretty solid. And if there is a phishing scam email that comes in, we did have one, actually, believe it or not, it was from a board member yesterday. She works for another school district, and she's been out for a little while on her bereavement, and her email address got hacked. So they sent out that nice little PDF that was blurred, that had an underlying URL, and then you go to the page, and it's Google, it's Outlook 365 to try to log in to try to get your information. So with that, that's going to happen still with a hacked account. You can't prevent all of those, but for a majority, or actually all of the spoof ones that have an underlying wrong email address, those are definitely blocked. And I've had folks test us to try to see if they've come in, and they just go into the quarantine. And you know, it prevents a lot of the phishing that's going on.
Another question is, do you have a SIEM that correlates data, a log management system? Is anyone using that?
No, I don't have anything in place. We did have a logging system with that we used a few years ago. It was pretty expensive, and the detail that went into kind of refining it was a little bit much, so we actually decided not to use it anymore.
Next question, have you implemented email security like TKIP?
I can't say we have.
That's what I was mentioning earlier with the three records, the SPF, DKIM, and DMARC records. Mm-hmm.
And then I know that this is something that you've all touched on a bit, but if there's anything additional to say, the next question is, what have you done to educate the staff outside of IT? And I know that you've talked about sending messages and so forth. Do you have anything else, any sort of formal programs?
We've worked off Digital Learning Day, and we incorporate within curricular areas. Our library media specialists are very instrumental in working with our staff as well as our students. It's very important to continue to help our students understand what it's like to be a citizen in this digital world. What kind of information do we put out? What do we keep private? And you know, how do things work regarding accessing things remotely? So, you know, our kids are living in a different world that we lived in, and we are all learning together.
And final question, what are your favorite security resources?
I would say my colleagues. There's a group of about 5 or 6 folks that are in the same region that I'm in, and we shoot emails back and forth to each other about you hear this happening? Do you hear that happening in your district? How are you handling this? You know, I would say that's my favorite resource, because amongst the 5 or 6 of us, someone's probably, you know, very recently heard about it, and is sharing it out. So I think of, you know, a robust personal network.
I have a couple, you know, CERT, CERT, SANS, SANS, and NIST, NAST. Also, you know, my colleagues as well. You know, I'll be talking to different organizations or colleagues, and we'll bump ideas off of each other. There's a real cool video that I encourage everybody to go see. It's called, just go on YouTube and search Anatomy of an Attack. You'll be amazed. It's a Cisco-produced video, but you'll see how easy it is for someone to phish another person. Just the daily life of a person performing phishing attacks. Really pretty cool. I sent it to all our staff. I sent it to our board, and they were just amazed at how easy it is to find information.
So we've had a couple more questions come in, but we are out of time. I want to be respectful of the time of our panelists here. I know some of you have a hard stop, so if anyone needs to go, please go right ahead. But I'm going to continue with anyone who's able to stay to ask these last couple of questions so that our audiences do get answers. So thank you very much if anyone needs to leave.
I'm going to need to leave. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. And so one of our last questions here, someone says, if our email server isn't on our network, like Gmail, which of those DNS records are still necessary?
All 3. We use Google Mail as well. And if you go on Google and do a search for, just type in Google DTIM record, Google DMARC, they'll link to each other, and they'll walk you through the path of setting SPF, setting up your DTIM, and then finally setting up your DMARC, and how the best practices are to set it up.
Yeah, Google's great with that stuff. They pretty much anything out there to use their G Suite. The information's pretty easy to find.
Great.
Yeah, companies like AOL, I'm sorry, Marie, just real quick, companies like AOL and Yahoo have set up these records back in 2014, so you probably be hard-pressed to see a spoofed message coming from Yahoo or AOL. It also broke a lot of listservs, because if you can imagine listservs sending out messages on behalf of people, those are basically spoofed messages. So people have been trying to find some workarounds. It broke a lot of other things with the listservs, but in all reality, it was really a good thing to prevent a lot of the phishing that was going on.
Are you using tools like Better Cloud or others to protect data privacy? What tools, if any, are recommended?
We're Better Cloud clients. Yeah, you mean with that tool, you can limit what certain groups in your OUs can share. You know, can you share to the outside world, or can you only share with inside the district? I mean, we haven't used those specific tools in Better Cloud, basically because we want to teach good use. You know, obviously maybe sometimes something isn't going to, someone might share something that they're not supposed to share. When it comes to kids, I would rather have that teachable moment than shut it down for everybody in terms of being able to not share things out. I mean, we have kids that work in biomedical classes here through Project Lead the Way that are always sharing files and interacting with folks at the Medical College of Wisconsin or Milwaukee School of Engineering. To me, that's not a tool that I use. That tool to help manage internal processes more than do anything in terms of protecting data privacy with that. So that, seeing Better Cloud, that's what I thought I'd respond to.
I'm not using Better Cloud or any tools like that right now. What I'm looking for is more of a content compliance tool. Google doesn't have it. They have it for their business customers. So, for example, if somebody's sending information in an email with a social security number, or if they're sending a credit card number in an email, it would block it from being sent. I've been doing some research on it, and Google just doesn't have it for the education side for gaps. or GAF, I should say. But I'm trying to find something that would at least be a compliance tool to block those messages from being sent. You know, staff, they're doing other things. They may not know that's not the best thing to send emails. We do promote and make people aware of that. It doesn't prevent people from still doing it, though.
Educate, educate, educate your staff and your students. I know that one of the pieces that we've done in the past is, or not in the past, we do right now, is we have a student graduation requirement around technology standards, and that's one of the things freshman year we talk to them about. What are things you should share, what things you shouldn't be sharing online. In the K-8 districts, our associate districts, that their kids come to us when they come to 9th grade, do a good job of that. So I'm much more of a, I still have my teacher brain on in that area, that I'd rather educate than have something that locks things down in place.
Well, those are great closing words. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Nathan. And of course, a big thanks to Diane for having joined us today. I would like to invite anyone who is watching today to please join us at our COSIN conference coming up here April 3rd through 6th. It's a wonderful conference, one of my favorites, primarily because it's small, about 1,000 people, but the caliber of those people who attend is absolutely fantastic. You have a chance to network and meet a lot of leading individuals in the education technology area. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. I would also like to thank our corporate partners. You can see the list there. I'm not going to list them all, but without them, this work that we do would not be possible, and we are very grateful to them and to their participation. So that's all we have for today. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.